we've picked out the highlight of the landscape, rather than trying to fit it all in. And by doing that, I feel that we've made a much more coherent composition. Let me just zoom out again to show you the difference. Although it's not a huge difference, you can already see that the lines that you were following in the previous composition just look further away. The barn and the tree look smaller, and your eyes got further to go to meet the vanishing point of the valley. Yes, it might show off more of the landscape, but from a photographic point of view and my personal perspective, I just feel like the tighter angle gives you more direction, more to look at, and therefore more impact within the frame. So next time you go out to do some landscape photography, ask yourself whether you can summarize what you see with a shorter focal length rather than trying to get everything in. If you do, then you might just come home with much more balanced, coherent and impactful landscape photos. If you'd like to learn more about composition in photography, watch this video next. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much for watching.
Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul. In this video, we're breaking down Prometheus 2. Now, so obviously, Alien Course Correction takes things back to the series' roots, and Covenant's always been a really weird movie, for me anyway. Releasing 5 years after Prometheus, it was a long time coming that felt afflicted by several factors. You can definitely feel the studio's hand here, and even Ridley Scott admitted he adjusted for feedback. I've even seen this film described as being like almost an apology to Prometheus. Their audiences expected a xenomorph horror, and instead we got a creationism study. Though I think the film goes into some great ideas, the general public didn't feel the same. Audiences often don't like being tricked, and to save the franchise, they went back to basics. Instead of titling this so it ties in with Prometheus, they tell you straight away that this is Alien. However, over its lengthy development, they went back and forth over what to do. Now, if you've seen our breakdown of Prometheus, then you'll know we discussed Paradise Lost. Paradise was even the title of the movie at one point, but Scott felt it gave too much away. However, that theme continued whenever Scott was discussing it. Covenant's original title was Paradise Lost, which he announced in 2015. Because if it's Paradise, Paradise cannot be what you think it is. Paradise has a connotation of being extremely sinister and ominous. Though this was changed in the end, quotes and nods to the poem are still found in the film.
If I'm in heaven, or rain in hell.
So they steered towards that, and initially Planet 4 is seen as a paradise. All the other planets in the film are typically barren, and there's the idea they need to be terraformed. However, Planet 4 is ready to go, and thus this played into the title. And though Scott stayed on, who didn't was Damon Lindelof. Saying he felt the sequel might benefit from a fresh take, he decided to step away from the series. Lindelof is known for not really providing answers, and thus they went back to the drawing board for the script. Having suspected he wouldn't return, Fox had actually already approached other writers. Now, the original idea was to take focus on Shaw and have her journey to the planet. David would then learn to further hate the humans, and he already hated the engineers. Eventually, he'd rise up above both and become the big threat in the galaxy. However, an extensive overhaul was then provided by Gladiator's John Logan. Crafting two stories that intertwined, this would mix Alien with Prometheus. So yeah, that was Paradise Lost, in which the crew would see their paradise lost. The film would also follow the poem's basic structure along with all its themes. I don't want to just repeat the last video, but David would be seen as a Luciferian figure who faced banishment on this planet due to standing up to God. That to the characters is of course the engineers, which David wipes out in a flashback. Just a side tangent as well, they might not actually be engineers, but we'll address that later in the video. Anyway, we would also have the Adam and Eve parallels with the new characters of Daniels and Walter. David would act as a snake that tempts them in the Garden of Eden, and then David and Daniels would leave the planet after David tricks the pair. Now, Scott stated early on after Prometheus that this movie wouldn't feature any xenomorphs. Instead, he said it would be humans versus AI. So Logan ended up providing the xenomorphs, but from what I can gather, the story followed the same leads through most of the drafts. Scott then announced there would be 4 prequels in his run, with this of course being the second. Scott said the original idea was that AI had evolved to the point it could create life, thus it had grown beyond us, and there was no need for us to exist anymore. This would then lead to Alien Awakening, before then going into the part of film it is to bridge the then roughly 30-year gap between Prometheus and Alien. The concept of xenomorphs set up a revenge. On the flip side of this, the humans had made machines, and there was a contract they wouldn't hurt us. Pretty much every movie that discusses AI, they always go over the rules that are kind of built into their systems. Things like iRobot, The Matrix, and so forth, they all have rules that prohibit machines from harming man. However, you could see David is breaking that contract unless he's turned on his masters. There's also the Mayflower Covenant, which was a contract signed by the Pilgrims upon reaching America. These guys are obviously discovering a new world, and I really like how that title kind of plays into the themes of the film. It also clearly builds upon the fears they have with Prometheus. The androids are like the disobedient child that the engineers saw humanity as being. This all ties into the myth where Prometheus gave fire to the mortals. The gods were worried we then overthrow them, and thus Prometheus was punished. We have the same thing with the engineers who worried about us after seeing what we did to Jesus. Now we have the humans worrying about AI, so it's sort of like poetry they write. Because even the theories that the engineers were created by someone they overthrew, and we may have this cycle in constant repetition. Beyond that though, the religious allusions are laced throughout. The Now Thing podcast discussed why Orm's seen as an outcast, and when you think about it, the premise makes a lot of sense. These are all people of science heading out to explore new planets. The second humans get cut off from humanity, this planet will house an ignorant society. Ignorance probably the wrong word there, but thousands of years from now, the humans on the planet, they may not know how they even ended up here. Information can, of course, be lost over time, and the inhabitants there might even create their own religion. I know there's people who also believe that humans originally didn't come from Earth. The theory is that we came from another planet, and then we were dropped here and lost that connection. So that could be very much what we're seeing at the beginning of here. Now, because of that, you could see why the crew are cynical to religion. Just in the same way David found his creators in humanity disappointing, the engineers were a disappointing reveal for what created us. I don't just mean in the movie either. It was all just about them messing about, seeing what they could create, rather than there being a grand global plan. So potentially the crew here might even be aware of that and was less skeptical of religion. I don't really think this movie debunks religion at all, and humans can still hold the same beliefs while going into space. However, you can see how that might wane in some people. Still though, the religious illusions are strong. Xenomorph later on stands under the crucifixion pose, and in David's lab, you also have the proto-morphs around the cross. Daniels even wears a nail around her neck. Though this is the first nail she wants to put to her cabin, you can see the symbolism for the nail that crucified Jesus. Jesus gets a direct cut as well, as we see this painting at the beginning.
The Nativity by Piero della Francesca.
The plot itself was an attempt to turn mankind into a Type 2 civilization which would save us from extinction. The creative team said they looked at Noah's Ark and placed the Earth as being civilization and space like the oceans that flooded it. The Covenant was the Ark that would allow them to survive and begin something new. We'll talk about these boat similarities later on, but the patch that the crew members wear also has two angels crouching and facing each other. This is supposed to riff off the two angels that are said to be on the Ark of the Covenant. The SOS was originally supposed to be a prayer. However, they thought that was too on the nose, and thus they changed it to Country Road. Take me home to the place. it shows they originally wanted to hammer home the religious idea, and thus it was interwoven in the plot. We also have Upworth choking around the table, which is supposed to mimic the chestburster moment. Walter just smacks her back like the like button though, and thus the food's freed. Around the time, there was the rumour that the film had a throat burster, and fans suspected this was foreshadowing it. There are even comments on the video that talk about how it could be her, but I think things got lost in the leaks. If you follow this channel for a while, then you'll know plot leaks normally have discrepancies. It's just a theory, but I think the neomorph that burst out of Hallett's mouth probably got spoiled, and fans just assumed it was a throat burster. What this movie does is also continue the tradition of having a different group of people facing the xenomorphs. This is something that Scott brought up when talking about making the movie, and they realized they had to do something different. Alien had the space truckers, Aliens had the Marines, and Alien 3 had the prisoners. Alien Resurrection then had smugglers, and Prometheus was scientists. Allegedly, they were pretty stupid. Covenant's made up of pioneers, and it is nice seeing how different groups react. Now, one thing I thought when leaving this movie is that all of the characters, bar none, they're all idiots as well. Like, absolute room temperature IQ, screen crush viewer, hit the thumbs up on Ryan Airy video type morons. However, in doing my research, I found there's actually a reason for that. In the Alien Covenant Origins novel, it outlines why the colonists weren't the sharpest tools in the shed. Look, basically feared his role being challenged once they got to the planet. He was to have the planetary head of security role, which was a very coveted position. This would basically put him in charge of everything, and thus he didn't want to be challenged. So they hired people who were neither that smart or good when it came to combat. Obviously, I always think stuff like that should be in the movie itself, because I hate how stupid they are, and it would have made my problems lessen a lot, originally anyway. Scott has a habit of making people watch deleted scenes and read supplementary material to get stuff, and hopefully, if you have issues with it too, then that's at least made it a little better. But I still think they're idiots, and I can't sanction their buffoonery. Now, for the rest of the video, we'll be breaking the movie down scene by scene, but firstly, just a quick word from our sponsors.
There's so much here that doesn't make sense.
Yep, you can say that again. A huge shout out to our partners at Arrow Video, who sell a ton of 4K Blu-rays on some really classic titles. They've got movies like The Great Escape,
Pharaoh Adams' last appearance. After saving the world again, he took the final medium, the Millennium Puzzle, when Aigami, corrupted by the Millennium Ring, attempted to drag the world into another dimension. Kaiba and Yugi engaged him in a duel, deciding the world's fate. The deranged Aigami summoned Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. At the end phase, it inflicted 3,000 damage to both players. Kaiba intended to destroy Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord, with Pandemic Dragon. Unexpectedly, Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord, was unaffected by his monster's effects. Instead, after Pandemic Dragon was destroyed, Yugi's monster's ATK decreased. Kaiba thoroughly screwed over his teammate. Had Yugi not blocked the final direct attack by paying 2,000 LP, the duel would have ended. Then, Aigami fusion summoned Crimson Nova Trinity, the Dark Cubic Lord. As he prepared to eliminate Yugi first, Kaiba stepped forward. He shielded Yugi with Crystal Avatar, sacrificing himself. Until the end, Kaiba never abandoned using the Millennium Puzzle to summon Adam. Truly fitting for a man with obsessive determination to duel Adam in the afterlife. While Yugi, battered by Aigami's monsters, with only 200 LP remaining, finally reached his turn. By this point, he was barely holding on. 3 consecutive duels, relentlessly thrown around mid-duel, his endurance was remarkable. Just at this moment, Adam, whom Kaiba awaited, truly arrived. Pharaoh Adam remained silent. He drew Palladium Oracle Mahad and instantly defeated Aigami, saving the world from the alternate dimension. After a wordless farewell to his partner Yugi Muto, he returned to the afterlife with the soul medium, the Millennium Puzzle. This might be his final appearance in Yugi's world. Upon learning Adam was in the afterlife, Kaiba used the power of the 8th Millennium item brought by Aigami to transport himself to the underworld solely to duel Adam. Pharaoh Adams' last appearance. After saving
Hey everyone, Waterfall Joe here. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the brand new OM System OM5 Mark II. So this is the latest camera from them, just launched a few months ago. In today's video, we're going to talk about the specs, the features, what changed from the OM5 to the OM5 Mark II. I'm going to give my personal thoughts on this camera, what I like, what I don't like, and then we're going to go out and take some pictures with it and see how it does. So let's dive in. Before we get into today's video, I want to give a big thank you to Milford Photo and Milford, Connecticut for letting me borrow their OM System OM5 Mark II. This is Connecticut's biggest camera store. It's the best camera store in Connecticut, and they have the full lineup of the OM System equipment. So anything from the EM10, the OM5, the OM3, the OM1, all the way up to the full lineup of lenses. So if you're in Connecticut or the New England region and you're looking for a nice OM System camera, check out Milford Photo in Milford, Connecticut, milfordphoto.com. Thank you so much. Alright, so here it is, OM5 Mark II. We've been waiting for this for a few years now, and here it is. So for those of you who remember, the OM System OM5 launched about 3 years ago in 2022. And here we are in 2025 now. OM5 Mark II just launched in June. A lot has changed, but also a lot of it's the same. So we still have the 20 megapixel sensor. It's the micro 4/3 mount, of course. It takes one SD card. It's a weather sealed body and a stabilized body, which we all love. The big differences we're going to see here is it is a new USB-C, which thank God for that. We're going to talk about that in a second. In terms of buying it, you can get it in a few different configurations. In the United States, the body only goes for about $11.99, which is the same price as the original OM5 went for. You can get it in 3 different colors now. You have black, you have silver, and you have this brand new colorway that everyone's really excited about. It's called sand beige. Unfortunately, I do not have a sand beige to play around with, and I actually have never even seen a sand beige to work with, aside from the videos online. But I would love to see a sand beige one day and play around with it. In terms of kits, you can get it body only. You can get it with the 12 to 45 f4, and you can also get it with the 14 to 150. So let's talk about where does this sit in the OM System lineup. So the OM System lineup currently has 4 cameras. You have the EM10 Mark IV, which is the base model, the beginner level camera, and it's actually the last OM System camera to say Olympus on it. After the EM10 Mark IV, you have the OM5 Mark II. So now we're in the mid-range here. So this goes for about $1,100, $1,200 here in the United States. You get weather sealing, you get better stabilization, you get all of the latest features, you get USB-C. Next up, you have the legendary OM3, which just came out about half a year ago. This camera is the chef's kiss. I love this OM3. It was a delight to shoot with. I made a video on the OM3 a few months ago if you want to go check that out. But that is such a great camera. The big differences from the OM3 and the OM5 Mark II, the OM3 is a metal body. It's a much more expensive camera than this, but it has all of the latest features. So once you cross from the OM5 Mark II to the OM3, you're kind of transitioning into that higher end market, where the OM5 Mark II is definitely more like a mid-level camera. And then at the top of the line, you have the legendary OM1 Mark II, which is what I personally have. Absolutely love that camera. It is their best camera, and not enough good things to be said about it. But that's about double the price of an OM5 Mark II. So you definitely have a good range to work with, anywhere from $600 all the way up to $2,200. And the OM5 Mark II finds itself right in the middle of that. Alright, so let's talk about all of the new upgrades from the original OM5 to the OM5 Mark II. First of all, I want to address the new color, which unfortunately I don't have to play with right now, but I have seen pictures and it looks absolutely awesome. If you're an outdoor shooter by any means, I think that new sand beige is a really cool option. And I believe it's a limited edition, so I think once they're done, they're done. So that'd be kind of a cool thing just to have. There's a few incremental updates that I think helped make the OM5 even better. So I personally thought that the OM5 was a great camera to begin with, and I actually was really torn between the OM5 and the OM1 Mark II, just because of the size and the price, of course. I ended up going with the OM1 Mark II, but there was a few things on the OM5 that I wish could have been perfected, and I think that they did it here. So the first thing I want to talk about is, of course, that it uses USB-C. Now, this was one of the biggest flaws of the OM5, is it used the outdated micro USB, and in a world of USB-C, it just felt a little bit behind. And now it's so great that the OM5 Mark II has USB-C. Funny enough, on the way home from work with this camera, I actually plugged it into my phone charger to get it all charged up. And I think that's just a must-have in 2025. Now, the next thing I'm really excited about is the OM5 Mark II utilizes OM System's brand new menu, the same as the OM1, the OM1 Mark II, and the OM3. This was one of my biggest gripes with the OM5, is the menu is just the older style Olympus menu. You know, it's getting long in the tooth. And now with the new OM1 Mark II, the OM3, the OM5 Mark II, it does have that newer menu, which is touchscreen, which, I can't tell you how awesome it is to have a touchscreen menu. I absolutely love it on my OM1 Mark II, and it's great that this is utilizing it. This just feels so much more modern, much more ready for the 2025 and onwards. That older Olympus menu's gone, meaning the EM10 Mark IV is the last camera to utilize it. I'm so happy that the OM5 Mark II is finally here in 2025 with USB-C and a modern menu. It finally feels like a modern camera ready to travel the world with. There was a few minor updates to the body, and personally, I never spent enough time with the original OM5 to notice. Now, they did rework this grip a little bit. For anyone who has an original OM5, this part is changed, and I believe it's going to be a little bit more comfortable on your hand now versus the original OM5. And my last thing to talk about is my favorite addition to this camera, and it is a button that I wish every single camera ever had. It is this button right here, the CP button. I am so happy that they added this. For those of you who don't know, CP stands for computational photography, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest features of an OM system camera. It's why I actually switched from Nikon to OM system, was for all of the amazing computational features. Now, the OM1 Mark II that I have, unfortunately, you still have to go into the menu to activate computational photography. But when OM System launched the OM3 back in February, they added a computational photography mode. And I was hoping that every camera from the OM3 onward would have that button. And so far, I was correct. So the CP button is one of the coolest additions to the camera. You can press it, here, let's see if I can do this one-handed. So you press the CP button, and then you can spin that back wheel, and you can pick between all of your different computational modes, which is just the best thing ever. Truly, if you haven't shot with an OM system camera, the computational modes, at least in my opinion, I think they're one of the best things ever, and they really make photography fun. You can leave your tripod at home, you can leave your external ND filters at home. It's all in camera, and it's just the best thing ever. So, for those of you who haven't tried computational photography, go try a camera with it and just be blown away by it. It's such a cool thing. And I'm so happy that OM System is making it easier to get there. You don't even have to go into the menu now. It's just right there on the top, and you spin the dial. It's that easy. So what are my thoughts on the OM5 Mark II? Personally, I loved the OM5, and if you go and watch my video of it, I actually had kind of a aha moment for the first time I used it, as it was the first time I ever had shot any Micro Four Thirds camera. I borrowed an OM5 for the day. I went to my local waterfall, and honestly, the size, the weight, the combination of the weather sealing and the stabilization, it's what drew me to the system. I can thank the OM5 for getting me into Micro Four Thirds. It was just one day playing with it, and it was enough to be like, holy cow, this is like the coolest thing ever. I ended up going with the OM1 Mark II because I wanted that metal body, the better IBIS. I wanted the 7 stops of ND filter, where this can only do 4 stops. I kind of just wanted the best that I can get. But that being said, the original OM5 was very high on my list, and I've always appreciated that camera. So in my opinion, I think that this kind of takes a few of the gripes I had and gets rid of them. You know, USB-C, absolutely love that. I love that it has the CP button now. It has the brand new menu system from the new OM system cameras, which just makes it feel a lot more modern. I will be honest though, I will repeat kind of what everyone else has kind of been saying. I think this is an awesome camera for the price, especially for the fact that it's exactly the same price as the original OM5 from 3 years ago. So kudos to OM System for not jacking the price up just because they added a USB-C port. But I will say, you know, I don't know how much longer we can continue using the same philosophy. Technically, this body is still based on a camera from about 7-8 years ago, the EM5 Mark II and the Mark III. You know, these cameras came out pre-COVID, and we're still kind of utilizing that same platform, that same idea. The EM5 Mark III, the OM5, they were great cameras. But it would be nice to see some type of change. You know, I'm not going to dictate what should happen, but I would like to see some new ideas, maybe a metal body, maybe something else just to differentiate itself. I do think we could use a new sensor at some point, like I said before. It doesn't have to be this stacked beast of a sensor. Maybe just something with a little bit more modern features, a little bit better low light, a newer processor would be nice. I'm not saying take your OM1 sensor and all of your OM1 technology and put it in this. We already have that in the OM3. But it would be nice to see something in like that $1,500 range, something to compete against the Canon R7 and the Sony a6700. Because at the moment, I consider this camera to be competing against like the Fuji X-T50 and the Nikon Z50 II. So I would like to see something with a little bit more horsepower, not as much as the OM1, but a little bit more horsepower. You know, I really like what OM System's doing, but I do think for the next OM5, I think we need to see a little bit more. Now on to my favorite features of this camera. First of all, I've already expressed my love for Micro Four Thirds. I am a Micro Four Thirds user. I actually sold all of my full frame equipment to go to Micro Four Thirds because of the size, the travel portability, and I just love the system. Now that being said, I've always considered Micro Four Thirds to be the ideal travel size, and I'm going to continue saying it. The OM5 Mark II here is probably one of the best travel cameras that you can get. I will say, it is hard to find a body with this much weather sealing. Remind you, this camera is IP53 rated. Once again, like the Fujifilm and the Nikon, the Fujifilm X-T50 is not weather sealed, which irks me for how expensive it is. The Nikon Z52 is weather sealed, but it doesn't have an IP rating like the OM5 Mark II does. And also, the OM5 Mark II is up to 7.5 stops of IBIS when you use selective lenses. That's really cool. That means that this body for $1,200 is fully weather sealed, like take it anywhere kind of weather sealed. It's stabilized, which means leave your tripod at home. It is a plastic body, so it's not a metal body, so you can't beat it up too much, but it's made for outdoors, it's made for hiking, it's made for backpacking. If you're looking to either get a first camera as your primary camera for traveling, or if you're a full frame shooter looking for a smaller camera for your day trips, this is absolutely an incredible camera, and I can't recommend it enough. Especially with all of the latest features from the OM5. I think these small updates will make this just a joy to use for your day-to-day use. So who would I recommend this camera to? So if you're at all interested in traveling, if you're looking to take a camera with you and kind of keep it lightweight, and if you already have like a full frame camera and you're looking for a secondary camera that's not so heavy and easy to travel with, I can't recommend the OM5 Mark II enough. If you're going to be doing a lot of traveling, a lot of just backpacking,